Hi there, my name is Rich Stauffer. I'm a fitness instructor at CFB Edmonton. I'm here today to talk with you about setting up your TRX straps and do a couple of different movements on them. I find this to be a really useful tool for anybody who happens to be in the field. It can, if you can only bring one piece of kit with you, I definitely recommend it. If you can manage to bring a kettlebell, that will really enhance what you can do and give you a lot of options. So I think it's a really useful tool. The TRX, the company that came out with this said, throw your gym membership in the trash. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is a very versatile and useful tool. I certainly think that there's a lot that can be done on the thing. What we're going to talk about first in this workshop, talking about just very, very basic TRX use. If you're an advanced user, probably some of this stuff will it'll be a little below your skill level, but generally speaking, this is aimed at the beginner. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the anatomy of the TRX strap, okay? So what we've got is the anchor point. That happens to be whatever we happen to be tied off to. So like I said, door frame, pull-up bar, anything like that. Whatever hard point isn't going to go anywhere, tree, that's certainly what we want you guys to be tying off to, something super sturdy. That is going to be what we're referencing here when we say the anchor point. So if I'm facing away from the anchor point, I'm facing you guys, facing towards it, I'd be spun right around here. Okay, next thing is we have an intermediate loop. That just allows us to kind of vary how high up we can put these straps from that point. Next we have equalizing loop. That's the next loop right here. Then we have the locking loop. That one just happens to have a little piece of material stitched in there, a little bit of webbing. That just keeps the straps from sawing too much, so you can't pull the strap all the way through by accident. Next we have a couple of stitch marks here. That just makes sure straps are more or less even or level. This entire piece right here is the main strap. Moving down the line, we have a cam buckle. That just allows us to adjust the straps. We'll go into that a little bit later. We've got the handles. Those are for your hands. And the foot cradles, surprisingly enough, those will be for your feet. So next thing I want to talk about is setting up the TRX strap. For this particular model, there is a couple different ones, but the principle is more or less the same. You want to make sure you are wrapped around your anchor point a couple of times. If it's wrapped around one single time, it can slide around a little bit. Right now, because it's wrapped around twice, the only really way for me to move it around is if I lift it up. If I have tension on there, it's not going to go anywhere without, even with this pull-up bar, which is relatively slick, you have to be pulling on it quite hard. The harder you pull on it, the harder it pulls back on itself. Okay? So as far as setting this one up for this particular model, I'm going to go up on my tippy toes because I'm not that tall. I'm going to pull it twice around. I'm going to throw it over top of this thing once. Okay, and then I'm just going to send it over one more time. I'm then going to take this carabiner and put it back through the straps, just like that. Again, through the pretty much right where it says TRX on this particular model. That looks really well. What you don't want to do is hit the metal through the metal. That can prematurely fatigue your carabiners, which is obviously not ideal. You don't want to end up on your face. Okay? So the next thing I want to talk about with regard to the strap is adjusting the straps, okay? So we've got a couple of cam buckles here. There are certainly ideal heights for the straps when you're using these things. As a general rule, if I have a bunch of new people in the class, I don't want to be playing around with adjusting the straps too much and giving them the whole life story of the TRX strap. So I generally say around knee height for the handles is a good place to start. There are certainly more ideal positions for the straps to be in, but for what we're talking about for today, certainly that would be a really good place to start. The three exercises I'm going to show you guys today are the TRX Chest Press, the TRX Row, and the Squat. There are certainly different versions of this, different adaptations to each of these different movements that we can certainly take, but for our purposes today, for the very, very basics of the TRX strap, getting good at these ones is going to certainly help build on some more advanced ones. So I'd like to go into the TRX Chest Press first. We're going to start facing away from the anchor point, just like I just demoed. And you're going to start standing straight up. And then all you're going to do is take a little bit of a step back, just like that right there. So I've just got a soft, slight angle in my body right here. All I'm going to do, it's kind of like a push-up called the chest press, so that makes sense. All you're going to do is lower yourself down and push yourself up. And after doing this for a couple of reps, when you guys are trying this, you might notice the buckles start to rub, or can start to rub on your triceps, on your upper arm a little bit. How you're going to avoid that is simply by lifting your hands up, just like that. You'll notice I have roughly a 45-degree angle, so this would be 0 degrees, roughly 45 degrees as I descend into the bottom of that chest press. Another thing you're going to want to pay attention to is you don't want to shrug your shoulders up. You want to keep your neck relatively long, just like that right there, okay? So after a couple reps there, certainly get the idea. Make sure the hands are relatively even. Make sure you don't gradually get into this position right here so those triceps are really rubbing. And that's more or less what we're going to do for the chest press. All right, so the next movement I want to talk about is the TRX Row. I like the row. It's a good variation, especially for people that aren't super competent at the pull-up or chin-up, or if they're really having a hard time, one of their shoulders is really up. You can get a lot of good quality volume in doing the body row or the TRX row on these straps. So that's what we're going to be going over next. How we're going to execute this one is we're going to start out facing the anchor point, which I'm going to do in just a second. I want to make sure you guys kind of hear what I'm saying before I do that. A big thing that I'm going to emphasize for this one, just like the chest press, is you want to be roughly at that 45-degree angles. For both of those movements, you can play with having the hands a little higher or having the hands a little lower, but when we're just starting out, kind of keeping it nice and basic, that 45-degree angle on each side is going to be the strongest position. Most people are going to be the least agitated through the shoulders, least provocative shoulder position for you, so that's what we're going to start with, as well as keeping the neck nice and long. So we are going to face the anchor point. I'm going to keep my elbows back just like before. I'm going to take a small step towards the anchor point for now. Obviously later on we can go play with some really steep angles or keep it nice and vertical, so as much or as little as you like. Then you're going to lean into the straps just like I'm doing right now. You're going to straighten your arms to full extension. You're going to let your scaps potentially move a little bit, let your shoulder blades move a little bit, and then you're going to pull yourself back up, just like that. You want to keep your neck nice and long with this one. You don't want to shrug your shoulders up by your ears too much at the top or at the bottom. Neck stays nice and long, just like that. Really squeeze between the lower aspect of those lats. So that is the TRX row. Again, I think it's a pretty useful movement. Again, really reinforce some of the posture that really pays off in the pull-ups and chin-ups that people may not be able to do in those. All right, guys, so the next movement we're going to talk about is the TRX Squat. I really like the TRX Squat for kind of offloading the squat a little bit, letting people use a little bit less than their body weight, especially for the bottom position. When you get a lot of people that really pitch forward when they squat, this can really help to get the feeling of sinking into the bottom of the squat, and the straps can really help for some confidence so people aren't worried about falling on their butt. So I'm a big fan of that. If you have somebody who's injured or simply just not strong, it can be a really good way to do this. Okay, so what we're going to start with is we're going to face the anchor point. I'll be doing that in just a second. The next thing we're going to do is just like in the row, we're going to draw the elbows back a little bit. I'm going to set my feet up in about shoulder width apart position, and then I'm going to descend into my squat. As I descend into that squat, I'm going to slowly let those elbows straighten as much as they have to as I get down into my squat with the TRX strap. And then once I hit my bottom position, I'm going to spin a second there, just kind of feel the balance there. I'm not going to pull with my arms too much. I'm going to settle into that squat, and I'm going to let my legs do as much of the work as they're able to. If somebody has an injury or whatever, maybe they're going to do a little less with their legs, a little more with their arms. But this definitely gives them the opportunity to get to the full range of motion where they may not be able to if they're injured. Okay? So once again, facing the anchor point, just like this. Okay? I'm going to get my elbows bent, drawn back here around 45 degrees or so. My feet are shoulder width apart, and I'm going to descend into my squat, straightening my elbows as required. Once I get in the bottom position, I'm nice and balanced. My heels are more or less, my hips are between my heels. My knees are a little bit over top of my toes, going over that second toe. When I'm ready, I'm going to stand up. Now, you don't want to be pulling too much with your arms. This is not an upper body exercise. It's definitely an exercise for the legs, so you want to be cognizant of that. But you definitely do want to, if you have to, let the arms do the work in order to kind of catch you if you lose your balance or anything, especially if you're playing with the squat position that is a little bit lower than you might typically do. Okay? So once again, send into that squat, come right back up. Just using the straps for a little bit of balance. Just like that. Again, I like to use this as a rehab tool or kind of to retrain somebody to do the squat. I generally have people do rows on the TRX strap to rebuild the pull-up pattern. So if somebody needs pull-up pattern rebuilding, chances are they may need a little bit of work with their squat as well. This is a really good way to set that up as well. Next thing I'm going to talk about with the TRX straps is a couple of principles that you can apply with the TRX strap, just some kind of tricks to make things more easily or more difficult, or really make good use of your straps. Okay, so a couple of principles I want to talk about is the vector principle. Basically, that just means that as you get closer to the anchor point, generally speaking, things get a little more difficult. To demonstrate that with the TRX chest press we were just talking about, okay, I'm going to be setting myself up in this position here. If I'm in this position, my body is fairly vertical. It's going to be a little bit easier, okay? Whereas, if I get myself nice and close to the anchor point, that's going to make my situation a little bit more difficult, okay? So by simply using the vector principle, that just helps us to make the exercises more difficult or a little bit easier, okay? Next thing we're going to talk about is the stability principle. Once again, I'm going to use a chest press to demonstrate that. Okay, if I'm doing chest press at this angle, it's not particularly difficult. I'm having an okay time with it. One thing I may do is I might lift up one foot. That's going to cause me to go for a little ride, okay? So what I'm going to have to do is, if I'm nicely balanced here and I lift up one foot, it's going to cause me to shift a little bit. Okay, maybe I squeeze a couple of muscles. All right, and then I can do my chest press. I haven't really changed what's going on with my upper body, but believe you me, I definitely had to do some adjustments so I didn't do that swinging off to one side thing. Okay, as a general rule, you do one side for a couple reps, you're going to do the other side for a couple of reps, so that can be a really good way if, say, you're having a hard time stepping any further back, or maybe you have a particularly slick floor. Some of these wood floors in some of our old gyms can get pretty slippery. So that can be a really good tool to make things more difficult, so you're not sliding all over the place. As you increase that angle, your likelihood to slide back into the wall or whatever's behind you there is going to be a little higher. So simply by using that stability principle, you can change stability, make the exercise a little bit more difficult, especially in the core. That's definitely an advantage I would say that training with the TRX has, is you get a lot of good core work in as well. Next up, we're going to talk about the pendulum principle. All that really refers to is anytime I'm making use of these foot credos, which I'm not really talking a whole pile about today. Anytime I am a little further away, this thing's going to get a little bit more difficult. Anytime I'm a little closer to underneath my anchor point there, life's going to get a little easier for me. Kind of the pendulum, if you look at it from the perspective of the camera there. Again, my anchor point is right there. It's going to be a little easier, or a little more difficult, pardon me, when I get a little further away here. And as I get closer to my anchor point, even swing underneath it, it's going to get a little bit easier. So those are 3 ways you can use the TRX straps to make your life a little bit easier, a little more difficult. All right, so the final thing I want to talk about with the TRX straps is just a little bit of they call them the 6 deadly sins of TRX. I don't know how deadly they are, but they certainly don't allow you to optimally use the thing, and they certainly can change the exercises to the point where they're not really the exercises we're going for. So we want to make sure that we do a good job of avoiding these things, okay? So the first thing would be, they say no stopping, okay? So oftentimes with TRX, they would use the 3 movements we just talked about, chest press, TRX row, and the squat that we were just talking about. Say that was my workout. I was going to repeat those for 10 rounds of 30 seconds apiece, we'll say. Once I get 5 seconds in, say I pick too aggressive of an angle, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use that first principle of the vector principle in order to change the angle, okay? So no stopping. If you're doing a timed circuit especially, say you're 10 seconds in and you realize, holy cow, I picked a way too difficult version of this chest press, all you gotta do, take a step away, all of a sudden you've dropped your load significantly and you can continue on. Good. Next one I want to talk about is no scraping or stripping, I guess. That's simply if I'm doing, again, that chest press, that thing's really scraping up against my arm. That's not going to be ideal, so you can make that adjustment there, okay? The next one I'm going to talk about is slacking, okay? So I'm going to use the row to demonstrate this. I'm going to face away, and what I want to make sure when I'm talking about that slacking, it's not your slacking off. That would be the stopping one, the first rule we talked about, first deadly sin. it's going to be having slack in the line, okay? So to demonstrate that, I'm going to show you that row. That would be that right there, okay? We want to maintain tension in the muscles for as much as possible. It kind of fits with the whole no stopping thing as well. I'm taking tension off my muscles whenever I let that go. It's kind of like if you were doing a dumbbell curl kind of thing, and every time you curled, you dropped it on the floor, took tension off, picked it back up. Not necessarily the worst thing in the world, say if you're doing deadlifts and that kind of thing, but for the TRX to really give you a good benefit, we want to maintain a little bit of tension the whole time. So we're not going to get that done by letting the, yanking on that ankle point, allowing a bunch of slack in there. So no slacking is going to be the next one. Next one we're going to talk about is no sawing. All that refers to is keeping the straps relatively even, and we're basically not sawing through this equalizer loop here. I can create a bunch of heat here, and potentially even wear my strap down to the point where it could break, so we don't want to be sawing back and forth on this thing. I've seen a trainer at a gym actually get their client to pull back and forth as fast as they could. I don't recommend that. I think it'll prematurely wear out your straps. Please don't do that with our straps. I definitely feel like there's certainly different ways to potentially get what the trainer was going after done, but certainly don't do that with your straps because they'll have a much shorter life if you happen to saw back and forth. As you're doing, say, again, the chest press, just so I can face you guys, you want to make sure that you're applying equal pressure to each side and you're not stuck, say I just want to be a hardcore and I want to do a one-arm version of this. Whew, almost didn't make it there. You will prematurely kind of wear out that equalizer loop, and eventually you'll just fall right out onto the floor there. So we don't want to be doing that. Okay, next thing we want to talk about is no sagging. One of the benefits of the TRX strap is you do get a fairly good core workout. You'll notice when I'm doing that chest press, I'm in a little bit of a plank position there. What we're talking about with sagging is if I'm in my chest press, starting out at the top, as I lower down, people tend to stick their stomachs forward, which is not ideal, okay? So what we want to do, or what I want to avoid doing, I should say, I'm doing my chest press. I'll just face this way for you guys. You want to make sure you maintain a solid plank position as you're doing that, and you don't allow your hips to kind of go forward and back. Along the same vein with that body position, maintaining that plank position with the chest press, as people start to get tired, they'll send their butt back behind them. Not ideal. We're trying to maintain that nice plank position, so we want to avoid letting those hips sag. Don't let them sag, and don't also, again, leave your hips behind as you're doing that chest press, or really any other exercise where we're forcing you into that plank position. Last but not least is the one that I probably have the least issue with, but certainly there are some real dangers with it, is no starting incorrectly, okay? So that's pretty much what they're speaking of, is talking about the starting position of the handles. What you do want to do is every single time you set yourself up to start a movement, you want to make sure you set yourself up correctly. So if I'm doing this chest press, it can be something as simple as, don't set yourself up like this, before you get into the bottom position, before you allow yourself to step towards the ankle point, maybe put yourself in that proper position. Make sure you're not really off to one side. You're facing, or not facing, you're facing directly away from the line that the TRX strap presents. You're going to set yourself up there, and you're already in a position right now where you're not sawing or not scraping the triceps with the strap, okay? So you want to make sure you just set yourself up for success. Take the extra second to make yourself, make sure that you're in the right position, and then go. How you can also, again, to set up correctly, to talk about that a little bit more, is, again, if I'm doing my squat, you don't want to start out too far away because then I'm running out of space. I'm pulling, the strap's actually pulling me into a bad position. That's not ideal. You want to make sure you set yourself up here so as soon as I squat, the strap's helping me and it's not actively making things worse.